Welcome to How to Configure Microsoft DFS with Superna Eyeglass. We're going to walk through the configuration, the DFS configuration, and actually walk through a failover and look at the logs to see how this all connects and works together. So Microsoft DFS, what is it? It's a virtual namespace. It sits in Active Directory. It's replicated, so it survives domain controller failures. You mount it like you would any other UNC, except that the syntax is / the name of the domain / some invented DFS root, which is a namespace. You can have more than one of these. Corp data is a folder, and a folder is backed by real storage, in this case Isilon. So we'll go through how that's configured in the DFS snap-in in Active Directory. Then we'll do a failover and look at what happens on the clusters during failover. So we can see here we've got 81.test, that's the domain. FODemo is the namespace. Corp data is my folder. And I've got prod.81.test and SMB2 share. That's a real share on Isilon. And we've got DR. The DR share looks like it exists, but it doesn't. We'll see that in just a minute. We also notice that they're both enabled paths. So we want this, so each client that connects will have two ways to reach the data, of which only the writable copy will be active at one time. So how do you configure DFS? Well, if we were to create a new namespace, you'd specify your domain controller here. Once you've done that, you get your new namespace. If I want to create a new DFS folder, just type new folder. You add your UNC Smart Connect zone, some zone, and a share. In fact, better to name it like this. Prod, you'd add DR, and they're both enabled. Once that's done, this is the only step you need to do in DFS snap-in. Once that's configured, we can go over to our Isilon and take a look at what you have to do on the Isilon side. So let's log in to our cluster. Here we can see the SMB2 share. This is the same one that we're pointing at with Microsoft DFS corp data folder. Just a normal share. You create it against some policy. Nothing new there. Sync IQ, what's required in this area. In this case, a particular path I'm protecting is this one, system zone DFS data. You create the sync IQ policy like you normally would. In my case, I'm going to protect the policy 1 path and replicate it to my DR cluster. That's no different than any other sync IQ policy configuration. Now let's go over and look at what we do in Eyeglass. Normally when you create a new policy, I'll just collapse a few of these, it would be automatically discovered up top, the very top section here. Configure application. So the default mode in Eyeglass is to sync shares and exports to both sides. This is not DFS mode. This is normal access zone failover, but this is where we put all jobs that we discover automatically. If I want to enable a particular policy for DFS mode, I select it, enable. That's it. So I already have some configured, so let's take a look at the ones I have got configured. Here is the one that we're going to use for the demo. IFS data policy 1. Green means it's processed this policy. So let's see what that means. Take a look. I'm going to select my policy. Cluster 1. SMB2 share is listed here. There's also a second share listed, SMB2. So this is the share that we're pointing at with Microsoft DFS. So let's take a look at what we can see on the remote cluster. We'll do that by selecting the mirror policy. Edit. So Eyeglass has processed this in DFS mode now. What do we see? So we see IGLS-DFS-SMB2. So there's a prefix applied to every share. There could be more than one. You can see there's two listed here that match the policy path of the SyncIQ policy. So during failover, what we're doing is removing this prefix and applying it to the source cluster. That's basically disabling one path and enabling the other one. So let's do that. Pick DFS mode as my failover, the cluster that owns the shares. It's this one. I'll say next. Select the policy that I want. We do check for open files, so we can take a look at that. I'm going to continue. There are some open files. Next. And we'll start that failover. So if we take a look at the log as we're running, first thing we do is we always sync the data. So that's what's happening right now. We have just made a recent optimization in DFS where we'll do a fast failover. And this basically means we've moved in release 1.5.2, we've moved the share rename step right here. So that is the effect of failing over by snapshotting the data, replicating it over. We then do the rename, but that means we're now pointing at read-only data because we've not run resync prep yet. So users will get an error saying read-only or write failed or something similar. But at this point, that's good because we don't want them writing their data anywhere because there's nowhere to write their data to that's protected. So we'll sync the data, we'll generate the rename operations, which is not in this release. We'll then continue on with the rest of the failover. At the point at which the file system becomes writable, then of course those writes will succeed and most clients will retry that operation with DFS. So let's just check in on where we're at. This of course is an early release where the resync prep step and the share rename is later on in the failover in 1.5.1 and earlier. So there's resync prep. There's the allow writes. So technically this is a writable file system now, but the share rename has not occurred yet. So let's wait for this to finish. So while that's going on, we can take a look at the protocols because we've not yet done the rename step. So we can see on the production cluster we've got the share names as they should exist. If we take a look on this side, they've got the prefix. And we're done. So here's the rename steps that we're done here. So now, if we go back to our cluster, I'll just navigate away and refresh this page. We now have a prefix on the production side. The shares rename on this side. So the switchover has now occurred in all DFS clients because they will have detected one path is failing because the share is no longer there. They'll fail over automatically. And that's it. So there's no direct interaction with Microsoft DFS whatsoever. We just change the share names and the failover will complete as expected on the clients. And we're done. So hopefully this gives you a quick overview of how to configure Microsoft DFS, how it's done in the AD snap-in, what happens on the clusters, how to initiate failover, and most importantly, how do I know if I'm okay to failover? Via our dashboard, you look at your DFS policy tab, and you look for the policy you want to fail over. In this case, we're ready to go because I'm now green on the mirror policy. It tells me that my data is in sync, and my shares and permissions and things are also in sync. So this is ready for failback already. Hopefully this is a quick tutorial on how to get this up and running and configured quickly. If not, consider reading the documentation or reviewing some of our training material on site.superna.net. Thanks.